What do you believe about language learning? And what are some common myths? The first question we ask about is aptitude. Are some people better language learners than others? This is a little tough because there are so many factors that go into language learning. The common assumption is that some people with a higher aptitude can learn languages better than others, and by better, we are usually referring to learning faster. However, this is not always true. There are a lot of other factors that influence your language learning, such as your motivation or your access to materials. You also have to remember that language learning takes a really long time. So if you think that you lack aptitude, but you're really motivated, you may catch up or even surpass those other learners. Motivation is key. It's really about how much you want it and how hard you're willing to work for it. So what about pronunciation? Do I need to sound like a native speaker of the language? No. Some people make this their goal of learning the language, but research tells us that it rarely ever happens. And it really isn't important that you sound like a native speaker because you are not one. Arnold Schwarzenegger sure doesn't sound like a native speaker of English, and he's managed to be both a movie star and a governor and a really, really rich guy. What matters is that you can communicate what you need to and that you can be understood. All you really need is to have a high enough proficiency level to be able to do what you want to with your second language. And what about vocabulary? Is learning it the most important part of learning a new language? So of course, vocabulary is important. If you don't know any words in a language, then you can't really speak it. But let's consider English. A rough estimate is that an English-speaking university graduate knows about 20,000 word families. But the majority of texts that you read every day are going to be comprised of 80% of the most common 2,000 words. So if you know those 2,000 most frequent words, you can still understand a lot. Thus, try and focus your studies on words that are very high frequency and words that are important to you. Also, make sure you're exposing yourself to a lot of level-appropriate reading and listening material so that you can hear words in their natural context. So, how long does it take to learn a second language? Well, truthfully, a while. Many people who study for 4 years at university are not actually fluent enough to use the language in many professions when they finish, although they can still talk about everyday topics and make a pretty excellent tourist. It can get pretty frustrating. It seems the more you learn, the slower your progress becomes. And this is because it takes a lot less time to move from being a novice speaker to an intermediate level speaker than it does to move from being an intermediate speaker to an advanced speaker. It's really a lifelong process. So don't worry if things aren't going as fast as you want them to. The key is to stick with it. And remember, learning a language is a long-term commitment. So set realistic, small-term goals which can fuel your motivation to reach your long-term goal.